The NBA draft is on Thursday. The Rockets have the 4th overall pick. So let's go out to the HR&P guest line right now and bring on Houston Rockets reporter for the Locked On Rockets podcast and the Locked On NBA podcast, Jackson Gatlin. Jackson, it's Jake, it's Cody, it's BK. Appreciate your time as always. Thanks for being with us.
What's up, guys? Always happy to join the program.
Jackson, let me ask you this. What is your sense on what the Rockets' ideal scenario would look like at number 4? Obviously, Wembanyama falls to 4. I'm not saying that. But what to you, out of the realistic scenarios you've seen out there and what you're hearing, what to you would be the Rockets' preference on how things would go on Thursday?
I think right now all eyes are on Almond Thompson. He's the prospect in this year's draft that you can make a legitimate argument for, that he has the highest ceiling of any player not named Victor Wembanyama in this draft. So whether you look at him as the consolation prize of not getting a top 3 pick and not getting Wemby or Scoot or Brandon Miller, there are some teams internally across the NBA landscape that have had Almond Thompson as high as number 2 on their draft boards behind Victor Wembanyama. So he's an incredibly tantalizing prospect. He just did his workout with the Houston Rockets and absolutely blew them away with his potential to be an incredibly high-level playmaker and facilitator at the NBA level, as well as with his physical gift, projecting to be a very, very versatile defender, 6'7", good wingspan, easily one of the best athletes anybody's ever seen. He's going to immediately become a top 1% athlete at the NBA level. So for the Rockets, I think if you're still sitting at pick number 4 and Almond Thompson is available to you, you walk away incredibly excited about this draft.
Jackson, I'm going to ask you about Scoot Henderson. You brought his name up a couple of minutes ago. I feel like in a lot of years he'd be the number 1 pick in the draft. Of course, we've got Wembanyama, this generational talent who's going to be that guy this season. But, you look at who's picking 2nd, and it's a team with the point guard. You look at who's picking 3rd, and it's a team with the point guard. Is there any chance, and this might be incredibly wishful thinking, but any chance that Scoot Henderson ends up falling to the Rockets at 4 on Thursday?
I think there's an incredibly slim chance that actually happens, mainly because at this point it very much feels like, my bold prediction here is going to be that the Charlotte Hornets actually take Scoot Henderson with the 2nd overall pick. Even though they have LaMelo Ball already, those are 2 dynamic guards that can absolutely coexist and share the floor with one another, especially when you consider that LaMelo is a bit of a bigger point guard, right? So you can kind of get away with LaMelo slotting in at the 2-guard position. You're not giving up a ton defensively, at least as far as size is concerned, because Scoot can still be your natural 1, at least on the defensive side of the ball. And then that gives them options, right? Because they might not be, completely married to the idea of LaMelo Ball long-term in Charlotte. We really don't know what's going to happen with the Hornets' new ownership group taking over, what direction they want to take the franchise after Michael Jordan ultimately steps away. So Scoot Henderson, I think, to me, presents the type of franchise caliber guy that the Hornets could have if they decide to go a different direction away from LaMelo Ball, or kind of straddle the fence and see if they can make it work with both of those guys. So while there's maybe a slim chance that it happens, I think the greater chance of something happening is actually Brandon Miller falling to number 4 for the Houston Rockets, because the Blazers are the wild card here with the number 3 overall pick. It kind of sounds like they don't have a deal on the table that they really like to be able to trade that pick and bring in an immediate impact guy to help Damian Lillard and to run things back next season. So my expectation is that they keep the pick and that they probably take Brandon Miller. But if they deal that pick to a team like the Toronto Raptors or the Chicago Bulls or any of the other teams that have been rumored to be interested in that 3rd overall pick, I think that could be the danger zone where maybe somebody comes in and scoops up Almond Thompson for themselves.
Jackson, you talked about the number 3 pick being on the move. Do you believe the Rockets have any interest in moving the number 4 overall pick? And what could they get if they decided that they wanted to put that on the market and trade that selection?
I think they've absolutely kicked the tires on some ideas around the NBA. Most recently, of course, there's all the hoopla surrounding Zion Williamson, right? And the Pelicans potentially wanting to move on from him. He's just got, so many red flags right now with the injury history, the questions about his desire, the off-the-court drama, all of it. But, and it's a gigantic but because you have to set aside a bunch of red flags. When he is healthy, when he is on a basketball court, he is easily a top 10 player in the NBA when healthy. He's an all-NBA caliber talent. And so he's the type of name that it would be a huge risk to try and move, say, the 4th overall pick, and maybe even more besides just the 4th overall pick for a guy like Zion Williamson. But that's the kind of swing that if you take and if it pans out, you look back and Rafael Stone would be heralded as a genius, a la the Daryl Morey, James Harden trade all those years ago.
Jackson Gatlin from the Locked On Rockets podcast, Rockets reporter with us here on the HRMP guest line. You brought up Stone. I want to bring up a comment he made I saw the other day, Jackson. He said that any free agent decision or trade decision is not going to impact their draft strategy. He says they're going best player available. One, do you buy that? And two, how does the James Harden factor in all this, do you think, impact the Rockets' plans during this draft?
I absolutely buy it. Every conversation that I've had, I genuinely do believe that they have, internally decided that whatever they do in this draft is not going to be influenced by any outside free agents that they may or may not be able to get their hands on this offseason. And as it relates back to James Harden, he had another comment that was essentially, whatever free agents they look to bring in, they have to be able to, play, and they need to be able to conform to the style of basketball that Ime Udoka wants to be able to play, right? And Ime Udoka's style of basketball is, he prides himself on having a team that plays unselfish basketball, that shares the ball a lot, that has a lot of ball movement with guys moving and cutting and off-ball movement. And that doesn't exactly scream James Harden as a basketball player, really ever. And I don't expect James Harden to suddenly want to change, going into his age 34 season starting next year for a, Rockets team that is maybe hoping to make the play in this upcoming season. All signs right now are pointing towards James Harden staying in Philadelphia. It seems like it was a foregone conclusion for months that he would come back to Houston. But that was because a lot of the outside voices talking about this really kind of just figured that the Rockets would just kind of bend over and give James Harden whatever he wanted, right? 4 years, $200 million max. Please come back to us. We want you back so bad. There's absolutely desire on both sides for a reunion with the Rockets and with James Harden. James would love to come home to Houston, but credit to the Rockets and their front office. They basically put their foot down, and they were like, look, we're willing to go up to X point to bring you back, but they're not willing to go, all the way with the 4 years, $200 million max contract. And I think they deserve a lot of credit for not just caving to those demands to try and bring back a player of James Harden caliber.
Good stuff, Jackson. Everyone's talking about James Harden. Everyone's talking about the number 4 overall pick. But what about the Rockets' other first-round pick? They're picking number 20 overall on Thursday. Are there a couple of players that you think they could be interested in, a couple of players that maybe you're interested in that spot?
Everything I've come to understand about that number 20 pick is that they have zero desire to actually make that selection at 20. And I say that with the caveat, they don't want to make that selection at 20 because they're not completely blown away with any of the names that are kind of available at 20. Maybe Jet Howard possibly as a candidate for the Rockets at 20, so that's a name to definitely keep an eye on. However, they might be in the realm of trying to trade up with that 20th overall selection. There are some rumors they might be entertaining some trade talks with the Dallas Mavericks for that 10th overall selection. And I think that changes the calculus a little bit, right? Because some of the prospects that you might be looking to scoop up with pick 20 would be another, development guy, another guy that you've got to think like a year or two into before they're really ready to contribute at the NBA level. That's yet another draft pick that the Rockets would have to stash away and figure out how to develop and how to remain competitive while also giving that guy some developmental minutes, hopefully, right, at some point at the NBA level. And they've still got a bunch of guys like Josh Christopher and Usman Garuba and Ty Washington that are already kind of in that mold. But if you can trade up to pick number 10 and maybe you target a guy like Dereck Lively, who would be a huge get for this team at a position of, I don't want to say position of need, but giving them a different look at that 5 spot, a really attractive prospect. A lot of teams are really eyeing him, and he's kind of shot up draft boards over the last month and a half or so, especially with his newfound three-point shooting for a big man. So I think that changes things a little bit. If the Rockets can trade up, then maybe there's a target they really, really like. But if they're unable to find a way to trade that pick up, then I fully expect them to just trade out and trade it for a future protected first-round pick or something along those lines.
Jackson, we got 30 seconds. This is the first time we've had you on the show since the Rockets hired Ime Udoka. Your thoughts on that hire and your early impressions on what he's going to do?
The Rockets absolutely crushed it with the hire of Ime Udoka. He is easily, I think, a top 5 coach in the NBA. He is going to be the leader for the Rockets during this next phase of their rebuilding process. He's the voice that they desperately needed in that locker room, and he's going to unlock a lot of things for guys like Jalen Green, Alperen Sengun, and Jabari Smith Jr., and whoever they take at pick number 4.
Appreciate you coming on, Jackson. Great job as always.
Always a pleasure, guys. Thank you.
Jackson Gatlin covers the Houston Rockets with us there on the HR&P guest line. You can follow him on Twitter at JT Gatlin. That's Gatlin. Jackson Gatlin